is because tonight's shir is a little bit short, so I think I'm going to take the opportunity though to present what I would call a secret weapon. And something I always speak about is the importance of chazering, the importance of review. And so it is a little bit interesting that I chose to give shir on Shagas Aryeh, which is extremely deep and complex topic, which probably does not lend itself to an easy review for people. So I think I'm going to address that right now. That is probably the biggest reason why people don't review is because the concept of reviewing is very daunting. Right? To review something that we've learned is going to take a tremendous amount of time and effort. And because of that, so we don't like to get involved in it. If I learned, let's say, an entire Masechta, and it's going to take me, say, an hour to chazer each daf, and it's a 30 daf Masechta, is 30 hours, so it's already very, very daunting. So one of the things that I always press for, even though I know it's slightly controversial, is always trying to review as quickly as possible. We could make reviews very quick, so then we would be more likely to review. So how long would it take to review one of these shiurim? So it would take at least as long as the shiur itself, right? Just to listen to it over again. To learn it again, to learn it inside, right? Even though we've spoken about that before, is extremely daunting. That it's pages after pages. And what I give is almost like a summary of what the Shagas Aryeh speaks about, although I do cover each topic, more or less cover everything that he says. So now going to present what has been for me over the past few months a secret weapon of Chazara, and that is a specific form of outline that was taught to me by someone who is involved with memory very much, and I've used a lot of his systems in other methods of my learning. And one of the things that he taught me was this concept of writing a kind of a visual outline of the topic. What I found is I can review if I write the outline, which takes a certain amount of skill and forethought, but the outline is written properly, so then you could review it at light speed, because you kind of already visualize how the sugya is formed, and you have it visualized on the page, and without even reading the words, you could kind of flow through it. I don't know if I can explain it without someone experiencing it. So what I've done, and I'll send it out also on the email for the people that are listening to this year, in that way, is an outline of everything we've learned so far in the Shagas Aryeh. Each סימן is about 1 page, and it has on it, it's a flow chart which goes horizontally and then vertically. So you read it across, like for example, I'll give these out, and you could take a look along just to explain what it is, and we'll explain what we could do with it. So for example, let's say on סימן Aleph, we spoke about Kriyash D'Oraisa D'Rabbanan. So if you look at it vertically, so you see it's divided into 2 topics, right? All the way on the right is discussing the sheet of Shmuel, which is Kriyash D'Rabbanan, and then the halacha, right? How we paskin. And then you would move horizontally across, right? We have talking about the maskana of the Shagas Aryeh, that really the ikrchi of D'Oraisa, and the parashiyos, these specific parashiyos of D'Rabbanan. And you move across, and then he brings a raya, right? So everything is in its place as far as how the topics are structured and how they flow together. Putting an entire סימן of Shagas Aryeh onto 1 page in how many words it looks like 100, 200 words, of course, is being extremely, extremely abbreviated. So you have to really understand the material before you would use this. So how everybody uses this would be, of course, a personal choice if you use it at all, or how you would use it. One way I would suggest is to go over the shiur maybe listening to the recording again, and then seeing how it follows along in the outline, and then you'll be able to, if you go through the outline 2 or 3 times, my guess is everybody should be able to review each page in less than 2 minutes, which means, this is not up until now, this is the first 7 Simanim, which talk about Kriya Shema, right? It's this package. Hopefully next week we'll finish Yetzias Mitzrayim, and hopefully I'll be able to produce for that as well. And then you could review, let's say, all of what we did on Hilchos Kriya Shema in 15 minutes. Right? So that's already something that you think about picking up on a Shabbos afternoon and going through, and then you'll remember all the topics that were discussed in the Shagged. So this is just one of the tools that I found to be extremely helpful. You can take a look and see if it's helpful for you or not. And let's move on to tonight's shir, which is the chiyuv of women in Zechira Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're going to have a page for that as well. We'll begin with a hakdama from the Gemara in Brachos, which discusses a little bit about the chiyuv of women for other things, and we're going to see how that's going to help us understand their chiyuv for Zechira Yetzias Mitzrayim. And that's the first Mar Makom Aleph on the sheets, which is the Gemara in Brachos, Chaf Amabis. Starts with the Mishnah, Nashim Avanu Kitana B'Tur Mikriya Shema Uminat Tefillin V'Chayavim B'Tefil Mezuzah V'Richas HaMazon. Women and Avanim and Ketanim. We're going to focus on the women. Avanim have the same din as women. Ketanim is really a separate issue in regards to this Mishnah. But they are pater from Shema and Tefillin. But they are chayiv in Tefillah, davening, mezuzah, and V'Richas HaMazon benching. Those they are chayiv in. And the Gemara explains these din. And we're going to focus on Kriya Shema and Tefillah, because that's we're going to use those examples in our discussion. So the Gemara says Kriya Shema Shita. It's obvious that Kriya Shema is the women are pater. Mitzvah Hasei Shezman Gramahu. It's a mitzvah Hasei which is caused by time. The whole mitzvah Hasei Shezman Grama, any mitzvah Hasei which is caused by time, Nashim B'Turos. Women are pater. Right? It's a special time to say Kriya Shema. So for women, don't have to say Kriya Shema. And that should be something which is obvious that the Mishnah shouldn't even have to tell us. And the Gemara explains Ma'udatima, but I would have thought, Ispa Malchus Shemayim, since it has Malchus Shemayim, we would make them chayiv even though it's Zman Grama. Kamash Malon, so the Chiddush of the Mishnah is that they're still pater. Then we skip to the case of Tefillah, Chayavim B'Tefillah, Derachamim Ninhu, it's Rachamim. Ma'udatima, and I would have thought, Holu Ksiv Ba'erev V'Avoker B'Tzarayim, since it says that we daven in the evening, morning, and afternoon, K'mitzvah Hasei Shezman Grama, so it should be like a mitzvah Hasei Shezman Grama, because it has special times where you daven. Kamash Malon, the Chiddush is that women are chayiv in Tefillah. So, we're going to come back to these sugyas in our discussion, that when we come to Zechira Yetzias Mitzrayim, so we explained in the previous סימן of the Shagged Aryeh that there's a mitzvah both during the day and in the evening. And therefore, we could possibly say that it's not a mitzvah Seishas Mein Grama, because there is no time that's not a time of Zechira Yetzias Mitzrayim. Right? And we'll come back to this concept. So therefore, we would think it's not a mitzvah Seishas Mein Grama, and therefore, women should be chayiv. And it's not going to be like Kriya Shema, right? Kriya Shema, we said, is a mitzvah Seishas Mein Grama, even though that applies both during the day and the night, because the Zman Kriya Shema doesn't apply the entire day. It does apply the entire night, according to the Psak of the Shagged Aryeh, as we spoke about in, I think it was 7 days. But the Zman Kriya Shema Shel Shacharis only extends until the 3rd hour. And therefore, there are times where there's a chiyuv Kriya Shema. There are times when there's not a chiyuv Kriya Shema. And therefore, women are going to be pater from that type of mitzvah. As opposed to Zechira Yetzias Mitzrayim, where there is never a time when there's no chiyuv Zechira Yetzias Mitzrayim. Therefore, women should be chayiv. However, the Shagged Aryeh paskins that in fact women are not chayiv for Zechira Yetzias Mitzrayim. And he first points out that seems to be the minhag. We don't see that women say anything special at night to be Yotzei Zechir Yetzias Mitzrayim. They don't daven Marav, they don't have to daven Marav, and therefore they don't have to say Kriya Shema, and therefore they may possibly not do it, and that seems to be the minig. And for the fact that they're potter from Kriya Shema, and they're not going to be saying Emes ve'emuna, and we don't find that Chazal or Masakin anything special for the women to do at night in order to be Yotzei their mitzvah, would imply that there is no mitzvah for them to be Yotzei the Chiyuv of Zechir Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now, we pointed out before that we really find this problem also a little bit by men, that if they miss the Zman Kriya Shema and Tefillah in the morning, they still have a Chiyuv of Zechir Yetzias Mitzrayim, but there's no takana for them to do it with. Right, so they somehow have to still say some sort of nusach, maybe the nusach which is spoken about in the Gemara on Daf Yudalid. There's a special nusach over there for someone that's not saying the third paragraph of Kriya Shema or Emes Ve'emuna at nighttime, but that's not as problematic because there is a way that Chazal were masaking the men to be Yotzei the Chiyuv. It's just this person, for whatever reason, missed that Chiyuv because he missed the Zman, if he was an Onain, or if he slept in, or whatever the reason would be. But there was some original takana of the best way for him to be Yotzei that mitzvah. As opposed to women, there is no format that was established for the women to be Yotzei their Chiyuv of remembering Yetzias Mitzrayim at night. So therefore it would seem that they do not have a Chiyuv. Now, how do we explain why they should be potter? So he explains that even though there's no time where a woman is potter from, there's no time where there's no Chiyuv Zechir Yetzias Mitzrayim, however, the two times are really distinct. There's the day mitzvah and the evening mitzvah. And those mitzvahs are bound by time. You have to say Zechir Yetzias Mitzrayim sometime during the day, and that's defined by between Alos and Tzesach Ochavim. And if you miss that time, you miss that mitzvah. You have now a new mitzvah to say Yetzias Mitzrayim at night. And that also has a set time between Tzeis and Alos. So therefore it's true that you have two times that they're stacked back to back to end up being that there's always a time of Zechir Yetzias Mitzrayim, but each time stands alone as a time-bound mitzvah. And therefore women are going to be potter. Now the truth is, this is a major machlokes in the poskim, this concept, and the Magen Avraham discusses it in the context of a very famous Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam, which I think it's kedai that we see inside. It's something everybody should be aware that there's such a shita, even though everyone disagrees with it, basically. So the Kesef Mishnah is an explanation on the Rambam, and it's written by Rav Yosef Karo, who's the author of the Shulchan Aruch, and he gives the following explanation, which is a major chiddush. So we'll see it inside, and then we'll discuss how it plays into our discussion about Yetzias Mitzrayim. Os Beis in the Mara Makomos. This is Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam Hilchos Kriya Shema, Parak Aleph Halacha Yud Gimel. Yesholim. There are those that ask, my time of b'shichlecha darshinan kol zman shivnei anam shochven al mitasam. How come when the pasuk says b'shachbecha that you say Kriya Shema at night, we interpret that word to mean the entire time period that people are sleeping? We say we say Varishim Bar Yochai Pa'am Misha'adam Kori Kriya Shema Beis Pa'amim B'yom Achas Kolu Nitzachama V'achas Achar Nitzachama V'yotzei Yedei Chovaso Achas Shiyom V'achas Laila. We say that sometimes a person can say Kriya Shema twice during the day, one before Nitz, one after Nitz, and he's Yotzei his two Chiyuvim Umasakasam, and we conclude over there the reason is the Kari Le'laila Mishum De'ika Inshi Degana Bahu Shaita. You could be Yotzi or Kriya Shema of the nighttime because there are people still sleeping until Nates. The explanation is not that some people are starting to go to sleep at that point right before Nates. It's not the normal thing people do. The explanation is people are still asleep. And therefore, the word b'shachvach on the pasuk means when people are sleeping. Most people, until alos, and for some people until nates. And for some people even later. But so if that's so, why don't we say the same explanation for the word uvkumecha which is Kol Zman Shnei Adam Kamim. The entire time people are awake. Dahainu Kol, which would be the entire day. We don't say that by Kriya Shema Shachris. Instead, we say that you only have until 3 hours at the latest, because the kings at least are still getting up. But we only have the time when people are getting up, not the time that people are up. So you see there's a big difference between B'shach B'cha is when people are asleep, not going to sleep, when people are asleep, as opposed to Uvkumecha means when people are getting up, not when people are up. So why is that? It seems to be two completely different ways of understanding these two words. And they're in the same pasuk. Who told us to explain them in those two different ways? V'yish lomar, so the Kesef Mishnah says, Deina chanami, Jahafi darshinalei, Minatora amrina hakori mikan v'yelch lo hifsid habrachos. That Deina chanami, Minatora, you can say Kriya Shema the whole day. And that's why we say, if you say Kriya Shema after this time, you don't lose out. You don't lose the brachos. If it's not Zman Kriya Shema, so the brachos would be levatala. We already explained in one of the earlier shiurim that's not necessarily true, because the brachos of Kriya Shema are not necessarily brachos birchas ha-mitzvah that have to be said only together with Kriya Shema. It could be that they are their own brachos which could stand alone. We spoke about that earlier. The Kesef Mishnah is pointing out, if you're not Yotze Kriya Shema at all after 3 hours, so how can you say the brachos? It's because we hold that you need to put gula next to tefillah. Gula is one of the brachos of Kriya Shema, and the tefillas are connected to the tamidin. The tamid is until 4 hours. So you have to say Kriya Shema in order to say these brachos. So that's why they said you only have until 3 hours to say Kriya Shema, so that you say it before tefillah. You only have until 4 hours to say tefillah, so we want to get you moving on that. So we make you say Kriya Shema before 3 hours, even though really on the Diraisa level you have the whole day. And it's an asmachta, the pasuk of Uvkumecha, it's the time when people generally are getting up. But that's not what the pasuk really means on a Diraisa level. And you should know that it's an asmachta. It's not the real pshat in the pasuk. Because we say you get until the end of 3 hours, because that's when the kings get up. Shows. Are the kings most of the world? In other words, what do we care that there's a few people getting up then? That usually would not be koveya azman. So therefore it's for sure like we set up until this point, which is that it's only a derabana. Right? So this is everyone disagrees with the Kesef Mishnah, but the Kesef Mishnah holds that really the Zman of Kriya Shema is the entire day, the daytime Kriya Shema on a Diraisa level. Now the Magen Avram also disagrees with the Kesef Mishnah. This Magen Avram is found in Siman Kuf Vav Sif Beis in Archaim, and he disagrees. And one of his arguments against the Kesef Mishnah is that according to what you, the Kesef Mishnah, are saying, that Kriya Shema can be said the entire day, then Kriya Shema would not be a mitzvah shezman grama, right? We saw the Gemara clearly stated that it was a mitzvah shezman grama. According to you, it would not be, because you have the entire day is a Zman Kriya Shema, and the entire night is a Zman Kriya Shema, according to the Kesef Mishnah. So it's always a Zman Kriya Shema, and therefore women should be chayiv. That's one of the questions that the Magen Avram asks against the Kesef Mishnah. So we see that the Magen Avram and the Shagas Aryeh disagree on this point, right? If I would have a mitzvah that there's one mitzvah during the day and another mitzvah at night, but together they combine to create a situation where there's never a zman, which isn't the zman of the mitzvah, the Shagas Aryeh taught us by Yetzias Mitzrayim, Zechir's Yetzias Mitzrayim, that is considered a time-bound mitzvah, and women are pater. And the Magen Avram is saying by Kriya Shema that if that would be so by Kriya Shema, it would not be a time-bound mitzvah, women would be chayiv. So this ends up being a machlokis between the Shagas Aryeh and the Magen Avram, how to view this type of mitzvah. Now, the truth is, there are really two ways. The Magen Avram brings a raya to his shita from the Gemara that we saw about tefillah. That we said tefillah has the times Erev, Voker, Tzarayim, and therefore you would think it's a mitzvah shezman grama, Kamash Malan. Now there's two ways really of understanding the Gemara of Kamash Malan. Whenever you have a Gemara Kamash Malan, so you have to ask yourself, the Gemara explained what the Havamina was, then the Gemara just says Kamash Malan, that we see that it's not that way. But it doesn't explain, very often the Gemara doesn't explain clearly what the Maskana is. As we explained what it isn't, but we didn't explain what it is. So in this case we said, Tefillah, we would have thought women are potter because of Erev Vokat Sarayim. Kamash Malan, that they're chayiv, but they're chayiv why? So according to the Magen Avraham, he understands the reason why they're chayiv is because I have Erev Vokat Sarayim that ends up being the whole day is a Zman of Tefillah. Right? Shachris takes you until Mincha takes you until Mariv takes you until Shachris. So it ends up being that there's no time where you're potter from Tefillah, and if so, it's not a mitzvah cessation Zman Grama. That's the Kamash Malan. And that becomes a proof to the Magen Avram's Shita that he holds if I have a mitzvah like this where there's different components, but when I stack them all together, it ends up being that there's no time which is outside of the mitzvah, so then women are chayiv, because it's not a mitzvah cessation Zman Grama. That's what the Magen Avram is bringing a proof from that Gemara. However, the Shagas Aryeh says that can't possibly be the explanation of the Gemara, because we hold two reasons. Number one, we hold Tfilas Arvis Rishus. It's a machlokes in the Gemara and Brachos, whether you have to daven Marav or not. We hold Maker Adin, you do not have to daven Marav. Now, Tosfos points out, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't daven Marav. It means you have to daven Marav, it's just if something came up and you don't daven, it's not a problem. And we also have the concept that Kiblu Aleinu Chova, that since our minig is that we always daven Marav, so therefore it turns into a chiyuv. But me Ikar Hadin, right, it was not set up as a chiyuv to daven Marav. In which case, so it's really a mitzvah Zman Grama, because it's true Shachris and Mincha, there's a chiyuv, but Marav there's not really a chiyuv that night to daven. So therefore, it would be a time-bound mitzvah. That's number one. And number two is we also hold that Shachris you only could daven until the 4th hour. So you have the first 4 hours are Zman Tefillah, but the 5th and 6th hours are not Zman Tefillah. You can't daven Shachris then, and you can't daven Mincha then. So Tefillah ends up being, certainly is a mitzvah cessation Zman Grama. It's a mitzvah that's bound by time. So what is the Kamash Malan of the Gemara? So he explains that the Kavanah of the Gemara is based on what the Rambam says. You see clearly in the Rambam, which we're going to quote, in Os Gimel, which is Hilchas Tefillah, Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph, and Beis. And the Rambam says as follows: Mitzvahs asay lispal b'chol yom, shenemar v'avadtem es Hashem lokechem. There's a mitzvah asay to daven every day. U'mipi Shmuel lamdu she'avoda zu hi tefillah. The avoda in this pasuk is referring to davening. Shenemar u'la'avdo b'chol avavchem. Amru Chachamim and Chazal say, Ezu avoda shebalev zu tefillah. An avoda which is in the heart is tefillah, and that's what this is referring to. Ve'ein minyan hatfilos min Torah. There's no certain amount of tefillah, so you have to say midaraisa. Ve'ein mishnah hatfilah hazos min Torah. And the mishnah hatfilah, which I'm not 100% sure what he refers to, but I assume it means the nusach that we daven in, is also not midaraisa. Ve'ein letfilah zman kavu min Torah. And there is no set time for davening in the Torah. Ulefikach nashim avadim chayim v'tfilah. That's why women and avadim are chayiv. Lefishi mitzvah sasei zman grama, because it's a mitzvah which is not time bound, because there is no time to daven diraisa. Elachiyah mitzvah zu kachu shei adam mischayin mispal b'chol yom. The mitzvah is a person has to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu every day. Umagid shichu shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He first has to give the praises of Hashem, v'achar kach shol tzrachav, and then ask for what he needs. Shehu tzarech lahem, things that he needs, v'vakashu v'tchina. V'achar kach nosin shechu dayal Hashem, then he has to thank Hashem, al hatov sheshpil lo kol echad lefi kocho. For each person what he got according to his koach. So we see from the Rambam that the Rambam understands the reason why women are chayiv in tefillah is because that these times of Erev Vokav Tzarayim are not diraisa. The diraisa chiyuv of davening is just to daven. Every day you have to daven, but there's no time for it. That's why women are chayiv, and that's the Kamash Malan of the Gemara. Since the Ikr tefillah is diraisa, and it's a mitzvah seisha lo azman grama, and women are chayiv. So when Chazal were masaking the tefillos, so they were masaking these tefillos also for the women. Therefore, that comes out that the Gemara is really a raya for the sheet of the Shagas Aryeh. That the Gemara is saying, I would have thought that since Erev Vokav Tzarayim, right, that there's special time set up for the mitzvah, becomes a mitzvah seisha zman grama, right? And if we would understand according to the Magen Avraham, which we anyway said we really can't understand this way, but if we would understand like the Magen Avraham, that means that it's encompassing the whole day, these 3 tefillos. Nevertheless, the Gemara is saying that I would have thought women should be patur, because that is time bound, these 3 times that Chazal set up. Kamash Malon, that we're not looking at the mitzvah d'Rabbanan to determine whether women are chayiv or not. We're going to look at what it is on a d'oraisa level. Since there is no set time d'oraisa, that's why women are chayiv. But if there would be a set time, even if it would span the day, nevertheless, women would not be chayiv because mitzvah is on groma. So that's the way the Shagas Aryeh concludes, is that Zechir Yisias Mitzrayim, even though it spans the day and night continuously, but we view it as separate mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah of the day, which is time bound, and there's a mitzvah of the night, which is time bound, and therefore women are not chayiv in Zechir Yisias Mitzrayim. All right, we'll stop here. Okay, so